It is week 134 of Decoding Fox News, and I'm your host, Juliet Jeske. Each week, I watch and analyze a whole heck of a lot of Fox News, and then break it down. I watch all the Fox News you'd never want to. Let's get into it. So I watched 22 hours of Fox News last week, and I honestly, when I was working on this newsletter, thought to myself, wait, when was the VP debate? Because it feels like it was 3 months ago. It was Tuesday. How is that possible? Are you with me? Did it feel like it was like months and months ago? I mean, I'm just like, oh yeah, I did another podcast about it, didn't I? And I wrote a version of it. There's a written version of it. And I'm exhausted. And I don't know my name. And I'm late. I like to get this done Tuesday morning. And it's now Wednesday morning, technically. We'll be in 20 minutes Eastern Standard Time. That's when I'm recording this. And I'm like, yeah, this one was hard because there's a lot of research involved. So I'm going to play my first opening, which sadly I'm not going to go over all the topics in this, but this is Chef's Kiss video editing here. I'm very proud of this one. It did very well on the social media. But this gives you a flavor of the tone of Fox News last week. Here you go.
And tonight, I've got to prepare all of you to get very angry because what we're about to share with you will rightly make your blood boil.
On a day of chaos around the globe and more suffering here at home, with two major crises unfolding. A port strike that could end up costing the U.S. about $5 billion a day, and the human tragedy, an infrastructure collapse from one of the deadliest hurricanes in American history. And overseas, a significant escalation. Iran retaliated against Israel's successful decapitation of Hezbollah's leadership.
The Mideast on the brink of war as Iran launches over 200 ballistic missiles at Israel. And here at home, over 45,000 dock workers went on strike today, shutting down ports along the East Coast and the Gulf Coast. The head of the union threatening to cripple the economy. American consumers will see shortages and high prices of coffee, fruit, foreign cars, chocolate, alcohol, and many other products. All this after Americans are still stranded in their homes. Hurricane Helene's hellacious impact on the Southeast, forcing citizens to beg for help.
In the United States, Americans reeling from the impacts of Hurricane Helene, and dock workers kicking off a large-scale strike along the eastern seaboard, and overseas, the Middle East, on the verge of an all-out war.
Well, it seems like it's falling apart.
Yeah, it's not just this. It's the longshoreman. It's the economy.
Right, the world is burning. We're on the verge of war in the Middle East. Let's see, the economy is a disaster. We have the worst national security threat at our border and the single worst response to a hurricane in the history of this country.
A digital op-ed. This is the headline right here. The Southeast is underwater. The Middle East is on fire. Ports are closed. And where is Joe Biden?
We just don't have a leader right now, and we're going to have to get used to that. There's nothing we can do about it.
Just a tad bit melodramatic over there on Fox News. Just a little bit. What was hilarious is that the dock workers' strike ended almost as soon as it started, at least for now. It was like 3 days, and they're like, we're done. We're good. We're not going to ruin the economy. We're good. I had so much planned. This is funny because I've had a couple different companies, more than a couple actually, approach me about possibly working with them. And they all want me to move my deadline to like Thursday. This has happened more than once. And I'm like, I can't do that because Friday is a day. And that happens. And I like to cover the full week, not 4 days. And this week is probably the best example of why I shouldn't have done that. Had I cut this thing off at Thursday, you'd have a very, very confused newsletter podcast that wouldn't actually reflect what happened. Because everything happened on Thursday and then continued on into Friday. So I had sort of a rough idea of what I was going to give you guys for the podcast, for the newsletter. And then Thursday happened, and now I have a totally new headline. I had to rearrange everything, redo everything. Here we go. Here's the headline. Fox News repeats Trump's lies about Hurricane Helene. Because that's what happened on Thursday. And that changed everything. I mean, I have enough material right now to give you 3 podcasts about 3 totally different subjects if I wanted. But we don't have that time, and I don't want to kill you with a barrage of Fox News clips. Now, I had to just record over a little section there. This is not live. I edit this. I'm very open about this. The reason why is my smaller cat, Thor, the tuxedo, the one that's the size of a large kitten but is actually an adult male, just has a habit of looking right at me and just going, hey, look at me, knock things off the counter, knock things off the table, knock things off a shelf. And he just did it 3 times in a row. Why? I don't know. He has food. I don't know what's wrong with him. He thinks that's his job. Okay, moving on. Sorry. Back to Fox. Just wanted to share since they are the mascots of the podcast. Here we go. Last week, Fox News doubled down on Donald J. Trump's lies about the federal response to Hurricane Helene, while also scaring its viewers about the damage of an extended dock worker strike and an expanded war in the Middle East. It's often said that cruelty is the point with some of the falsehoods promoted by the right-wing media machine, but I couldn't help but think of a devoted fan of Fox News sitting outside of a destroyed home, believing the lie that FEMA would only offer them nothing more than a one-time payment of $750. The way the network handled the avalanche of disinformation generated by its glorious leader, Donald J. Trump, made me think of the many times I saw Fox News hosts downplay the severity of COVID-19 or infer that the vaccine for the virus might be harmful. Fox News doesn't seem to care about the well-being of its own viewers as long as they keep tuning in and believing the MAGA nightmare that Donald J. Trump is their savior from the marauding mobs of dangerous non-white immigrants. Now, due to time and space, I'm not going to focus on the other topics. I would love to, but we'd have like a 4-hour podcast, and I would be a puddle on the ground at the end there. But I'm just going to focus on how Trump lied about FEMA and the federal disaster relief response. Anyone exclusively watching Fox News last week would have missed out on climate disasters in Asia and Europe, along with more positive data for the U.S. economy. Shows I covered last week were Fox and Friends, plus 4 hours on Wednesday. They had an extra hour in their post-debate coverage. The Five, Hannity, the pre-debate coverage, the post-debate coverage, Fox News at night on Tuesday, and the Ingram Angle also on Tuesday. Don't do that to yourself. It's cruel. Cruel and unusual punishment there. So how Fox News compared to the PBS NewsHour. This is a video that I created, splicing, going back and forth between PBS and Fox News. You should be able to hear the difference. It's much easier to follow in a video format, but I think you should be able to hear the difference because one voice you're going to hear is Lisa Desjardins, who's with PBS, and the other is the incredibly well-known Hannity. And what happened was, on Monday, Donald J. Trump traveled to a hurricane-stricken area of Georgia to kind of give like a press conference of sorts. And he also claimed he was bringing help. Now, I want to just preface that Samaritan's Purse, which Fox has been promoting very aggressively, which is run by Franklin Graham, who's a televangelist, is located in the hurricane zone. It's located right next to an area that got hit really badly by Hurricane Helene in North Carolina. So the headquarters of this charity is right there. You could literally like walk from it. So it's very disingenuous for them to compare a federal agency like FEMA to a charity where it's right there already. You know, they don't have to travel. They're there. So they even talked about on Fox how a lot of the volunteers and workers at Samaritan's Purse couldn't get home and couldn't get to their headquarters because they live right there. So anyway, here we go. We're going to start with, it's going to start with PBS, and you'll hear it kind of go back and forth between the two networks. Here we go.
Against the backdrop of a shattered furniture store, former President Trump stopped in hard-hit Valdosta, Georgia today, saying it was no time to campaign.
Today, Donald Trump, he flew to Valdosta, Georgia, to witness the devastation up front and personal and firsthand, and meet with disaster relief specialists from Franklin Graham himself and Samaritan's Purse.
But just an hour earlier, as he arrived in the area, Trump accused the Biden-Harris administration of mishandling Hurricane Helene.
They're not being responsive. The federal government is not being responsive, but they're having a very hard time getting the president on the phone. He won't get on, and of course the vice president, she's out someplace campaigning, looking for money.
That was not true. Georgia Governor Brian Kemp this morning thanked President Biden for calling him yesterday about the storm.
He just said, hey, what do you need? He offered that if there's other things we need, just to call him directly, which I appreciate that.
Now, noticeably missing on the ground, the current president, Joe Biden, Vice President Kamala Harris. Now, Kamala, well, she spent the weekend on the West Coast where she attended a very glitzy fundraiser in Los Angeles with her Hollywood friends.
And as for the vice president, she actually cut short a campaign and fundraising trip, canceling events in Nevada to attend a hurricane briefing at FEMA headquarters in D.C.
We will continue to do everything we can to help you recover and to help you rebuild, no matter how long it takes.
What have I been saying? The Democratic Party today is now a party of coastal elites. Hollywood, New York, D.C. Republicans are now the party of the hardworking men and women, the people that really make this country great. And, of course, Kamala did, however, she did find the time to post a stage picture on X, at least pretending to care about the people in the Southeast. Joe Biden, he spent all weekend at the beach in Delaware, claiming to be on his phone, but we know he was relaxing. They said that Joe was on his phone a lot, managing the disaster recovery from afar.
So you can see how by going back and forth kind of in different topics, those were both basically about the same length, those two segments. The only thing I cut out of Hannity was there was another section of Trump talking, and he really wasn't saying anything interesting that needed to be in that clip, which is why I cut it. But you could see how Hannity's saying, oh, there's no help to be found. This whole area has been completely abandoned. Georgia's been abandoned by the federal government. And then PBS is like, no, here, the governor of Georgia thanked President Biden. And there was a clip of him thanking President Biden. And then there was a clip of Kamala Harris at FEMA headquarters, cutting her fundraiser short so she could go to FEMA headquarters. And Reed Galen posted a clip about this. He's from the Lincoln Project, about a very brief clip about why you do not want the president showing up in a disaster area right after it's happened. And this should be obvious. But because the president is the president, they can't just show up and be like, hello, can I help you? They show up with a motorcade and helicopters and all kinds of crazy security and snipers and the whole 9 yards. And they have to clear the area. They have to make sure it's safe and secure for the president. And all of this creates a lot of disruption. And when you're dealing with an area where you don't even have roads and you're still looking for, survivors, you're still trying to save people, you do not want anything like that in that area. Trump didn't care. He just showed up anyway. Biden waited. He's been to some of these areas already, but he waited until the governor said it was okay for him to show up, because you really don't need to physically be there in order to help. FEMA was there before the storm even hit. They've already paid out millions of dollars in claims. But we're going to get to that in a minute. So I'm going to kind of go back in time from earlier this same day on Monday when they were discussing this on The Five, and Jessica Tarloff, probably the best liberal on the network, gave her 2 cents about some of the disinformation that was already starting. Again, this is before Trump dropped several bombs, verbal bombs, as it were, lies on Thursday. So here's Jessica Tarloff.
By the way, the $700 was the FEMA limit. So Donald Trump and his supporters are running the same old tired playbook that they did with Maui and they did with East Palestine. So not only was Joe Biden on top of this, he signed the disaster declarations even before the storms hit, to make sure that there would be no delay in goods and services. Donald Trump's social media posts contain blatant lies, like Governor Kemp can't reach the president. Governor Kemp gave a press conference yesterday where he said, I just spoke to the president. He has promised me every single thing that I need. McMaster from South Carolina, also a conservative, getting everything that he wants, and then Roy Cooper as well. And there's only one president that we are talking about who actually has denied relief for one of these states. In 2017, Roy Cooper asked after Hurricane Matthew for a lot of money, and he got 1% of his ask. They denied 99% of what he was asking for after that hurricane came. There are 3,300 FEMA personnel there, 5,500 National Guardsmen from 11 states, and search and rescue from 19 states. That doesn't reduce the devastation of this and how horrific it is, but to say that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris are out to lunch during this, or they're sitting on a beach reclining there, they are clearly giving them what they need. They will be showing up when it is appropriate. And it's different for Donald Trump, who is not in office. He's just a guy trying to be president again, to show up and throw some bounty at people.
Now, of course, the throwing bounty at people is a reference to an appearance Donald J. Trump made in Puerto Rico after a hurricane, where he picked up rolls of paper towels and threw them into the crowd. Donald J. Trump, it's my personal opinion that he neglected that situation horribly, and he seemed to keep forgetting that Puerto Rico was part of the United States, because he would say things that just were like, wait a second, no, that's part of the United States. I don't know if you're aware of that, but that is, it's not a state, it's a territory, but it's about a shade away from a U.S. state. It's, oh my goodness. I don't want to go off too much on a tangent about that because we don't have time. But again, in that clip, Jessica Tarlov sort of mentions why you do not want a sitting president coming to a disaster area right after it happened, because that person ends up causing major problems for rescue teams and for recovery teams and for people who are just trying to get basic necessities to people. You do not want to make their lives difficult. And when the president shows up with this huge entourage of security and snipers and all that, you make everybody's life difficult. So I did look into her claim about Governor Cooper receiving 1% of the aid that he asked for. And there is a paper trail on that. So and I have a hyperlink to it in the newsletter being the written version of this podcast, which can be found on my Substack channel. So in May 2017, Governor Cooper of North Carolina, who was a Democrat, wrote a letter to then President Donald J. Trump 6 months after his state was badly damaged by Hurricane Matthew, complaining about the federal response to the disaster. Governor Cooper requested, I'm just going to round this number up, approximately $930 million in federal funding, as his state had 82,000 families registered with FEMA, along with extensive property damage. Most of the requests Cooper sought were in the form of CDBG-DR funding for housing, public buildings, and other infrastructure. In his letter, Governor Cooper said he'd only received, at this point, $6.1 million in relief. That's for an entire state. So, now we're about to get into the big lie that's going to lead into the rest of the clips. So since we're about halfway through, I should give a quick shout out to my sponsor. If you're wondering why you haven't had to listen to a commercial for something, it's because I don't have any advertisers yet. From what I've been able to read, I need about 4 times the following, which is crazy because I'm like, wow, that's a lot. Before I can get ads on my own. But that's okay because I only have one ad and you're about to listen to it. Who is the sponsor of Decoding Fox News? That would be the listeners of this podcast and the readers of my newsletter. I am 100% crowdsourced, meaning I have no large donor, I have no large sponsor. There's no one pulling my strings. There's nobody telling me what to say or telling me what to do or what to cover. I am here for my readers and listeners and you alone. If you can't afford to become a subscriber, subscriptions start at $5 a month or $55 for the year. I also have a founding. Somebody just joined today at the founding level. Thank you so much. That is $168. That's just for people who really, really want to support this project, and I thank you immensely for that. Thank you so much. It's also an option All paid subscribers and paid supporters get exclusive content. I'm a little late this week, and I apologize for it. It's just been a lot to cover with the debate and everything else. Chapter 7 is coming for Project 2025, and that's about it. If you can't afford to become a sponsor, share the podcast, share the newsletter. I'm not hawking supplements or cookware or skincare or weird apps. You know, all for weird apps. I would hawk a weird app if they asked me. There's some products I wouldn't hawk. No liquor. We're never hawking liquor on this podcast, and I won't hawk gambling. So there you go. Tip of the hat to people who don't. There's other people who don't. Anyway, I'm rambling. Here we go. We're going to get into the lie of the week, which again happened on a Thursday, which is why I'm so proud that I covered the whole week. I don't just stop at a Thursday and wrap it up and think, oh, we're in, Friday's always a slow news day. Last week, that was not the case. So what happened Thursday is I'm watching The Five, and they open with the clip that I'm about to play you. And I went, are you kidding me? And I just sat back and just watched multiple people on Fox News amplify this lie. And here's the lie. This is Trump at a rally in Saginaw, Michigan.
Kamala spent all her FEMA money, billions of dollars, on housing for illegal migrants. They stole the FEMA money just like they stole it from a bank so they could give it to their illegal immigrants.
Now, the first clue that is a blatant lie is he's talking about Kamala Harris spending FEMA money. Now, that should be obvious that she can't do that. The person who has the power in this country is the president of the United States. The vice president is mostly there in case the president dies. The vice president does not have unilateral powers to kind of leap over the president and do anything, really. They can give a speech, that's about it, but they can't do anything with policy without the president knowing about it or having the president's approval. They just can't. They can't write an executive order. They can't do anything. They are the president of the Senate. They rule over the Senate, and sometimes they cast a tie-breaking vote. That's about it. But she can't just say, you know what? This is where the FEMA money goes. Oh, absolutely not. Actually, Congress is in charge of that, but we're going to get into that in a moment. So this is just a brief how FEMA works. FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, was created via an executive order in 1979 during the Carter administration, but became part of the Department of Homeland Security in 2003. Multiple media outlets, along with FEMA itself, issued corrections on Trump's false statements. FEMA published a series of statements debunking Trump's claims. And here's one of them. No money is being diverted from disaster response needs. FEMA's disaster response efforts and individual assistance is funded through the Disaster Relief Fund, which is a dedicated fund for disaster efforts. Disaster Relief Fund money has not been diverted to other non-disaster related efforts. That is directly from FEMA's website. According to reporting by the Washington Post, Congress allocated specific amounts for different departments within FEMA. This is, you get really into this in Project 2025 because they go into the breakdown of each government agency, and they're all kind of like different departments within an agency. It's a bureaucracy. That's how the government works. So within FEMA is the Shelter and Services Program, SSP, which is an abbreviation for it, which provides grants to local governments and nonprofits to help take care of undocumented immigrants. Last year, Congress boosted the budget for SSP from $360 million for fiscal year 2023 to $650 million for fiscal year 2024. The SSP funding is not meant for disaster relief. According to rollcall.com, the total budget allocated for disaster relief for FEMA is $36.3 billion for the fiscal year 2024. So when you think about that, this idea that Joe Biden or Kamala Harris, which again, she can't do that, would steal money for immigrants, it doesn't make any sense. Because if you're talking about $650 million total that was already allocated, because that's how allocations work. This is previously done at the beginning of the year. They say this is how much this department gets, and this is how much that department gets. FEMA's run out of money before. because natural disasters are hard to predict, and sometimes they cost more money than anybody anticipated. So this is not unusual that FEMA is about to run out of money for the fiscal year. And there's also some drama, I cannot waste too much time on that, with Congress and allocating funds and voting against it and yada, yada, yada. But the budget for disaster funds, again, is $36.3 billion. It's an enormous amount of money. So the Washington Post also reported that in 2019, while still in the middle of hurricane season, then President Donald J. Trump took $271 million from DHS programs, including $155 million from the disaster fund to pay for immigration detention space and temporary hearings locations for asylum seekers who were forced to wait in Mexico. So Donald J. Trump did what he's accusing Biden of doing. Now, there's no evidence that Biden has done this. Zero. Nothing. But Trump did it. So that's probably why Trump came up with this idea. And Fox just went ahead and repeated his lies. So we're going to just play some of these clips. We're going to start with the 5, and we're going to move on to Hannity. Here we go.
FEMA coming under fire for running low on funds for storm victims while spending $500 million on illegal immigrants.
And FEMA's running low on funds because they're blowing it all on illegals. We're learning how $500 million of FEMA money, your hard-earned taxpayer cash, has been helping out illegal immigrants.
And by the way, it's $1 billion of FEMA money. Biden in 2022 created a program that allows the transfer of FEMA money.
Now, those 3 clips that I just played you are all right on top of each other. So they play the Trump clip, and then they cut immediately to Dana Perino. After Dana Perino is Jesse Waters, and then the next, within like a minute or so, we hear from Judge Jeanine Pirro. And the amount that they're claiming that Biden stole, or they're actually saying Harris, which is, again, insane, because the vice president can't do that. They're claiming it's now over $1 billion. Does she justify that? Does she explain that? No, she does not. Does she explain what this program is in 2022? She does not. I didn't even bother to look it up because I found what I needed on FEMA and other sources where they basically say, no, allocations work this way. The Congress takes the money ahead of time and they say, this department gets this much, this department gets this much, this department gets this much. If you've ever worked in any sort of government situation, you know that's how everything is done. And that's to try to control cost. So once the money runs out, the money runs out. And if they can extend it, they can extend it. But there's usually a long process of like, well, we got to go back. We have to fill out forms and yada, 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 yada. And in the federal government, they have to go to Congress and then say, hey, Congress, we ran out of money. Can you give us more? They may or may not get it. So here we go. Sean Hannity's going to repeat that $1 billion claim.
FEMA is out of money, and wait till you hear the reason why. The Biden-Harris administration, we now have learned, raided FEMA's piggy bank for other endeavors. They took over $1 billion of FEMA funds supposed to be available for national emergencies, leave the money where it belongs, in a lockbox for emergencies when they happen for FEMA. Do the people of Appalachia just not look the right way? Maybe you don't like how they vote historically. We didn't find out that they diverted the money to their 11.5 million unvetted illegal immigrants, some from countries with terror ties, some top geopolitical foes, considering FEMA has no money because they gave it to illegal immigrants.
But the idea of taking money out of FEMA to help illegal immigrants is just really unconscionable.
I just want to point out that that is a sitting U.S. Senator, Lindsey Graham, one of the senators for South Carolina, one of the states that was hit, repeating the same lie that Donald J. Trump has been promoting. Could somebody, I don't know, look this up? Because FEMA's been screaming, hey, that's not true, that's not true. And you'd think that a senator, a sitting senator, would know how things are appropriated. You'd think. He doesn't care. It's just shameful. Next, we're going to move to 2 propagandists, so not expecting a lot there with them. Tommy Lauren first, and then we move on to Stephen Miller.
FEMA wasted that money on illegal immigrants.
Kamala Harris turned FEMA into an illegal alien resettlement agency.
Biden and Harris raided FEMA's budget. They spent $1 billion+ on housing, food, education, healthcare, sex change operations.
Hannity kept bringing up sex change operations last week. It was kind of obnoxious. And there he's just claiming that, again, this was a lie. This money was not taken from the disaster relief fund. That's been left alone. The money allocated for immigrants was allocated at the beginning of the year. It has nothing to do with this. It was not recently moved. It was not raided. It was not stolen. None of this is true. And then he brings up sex change operations because theoretically, maybe, I guess, could you give me one example of one sex change operation for a migrant that was paid for by the U.S. tax dollars? I'd love to see it. I don't think it exists. But next up, and this is especially cruel, Sarah Carter, who's a Fox News correspondent who kind of exclusively works with Sean Hannity. She's talking to a hurricane victim in, it was North Carolina, and she's repeating this same claim, which I think is just incredibly cruel because it's not true. Here we go.
FEMA has allocated $1.4 billion, but that money was allocated for illegal migrant crisis.
Look at what they're doing with FEMA. We don't have money for people in North Carolina, but we have it for the immigrants.
So I thought it was really important to include that last clip. It's from Fox and Friends. Steve Doocy did a segment for Breakfast with Friends where he went to a bar in Florida that was underperforming. The owner said he was going to shut down. He was very mega friendly. And people had complained on the internet that he was too political, that they'd go to this bar and there's like stuff everywhere about Trump and they didn't feel comfortable. And so that was, that's at least the line he used. I don't know what was going on. But Fox and Friends went down there with a crew early in the morning. Place is packed, all these MAGA people, and they're like, yay, keep this place open. And that was just a random person that Ducey happened to interview. So within 24 hours, basically, of Trump making up a story, less than 24 hours, really, of Trump making up a story about, Biden, or in this case, Harris, which is even more absurd, stealing money from the disaster fund to use for migrants, it was being repeated by a random person who probably watches a lot of Fox News. And this is the right-wing ecosystem that I and others battle every single day. Because it is so incredibly frustrating that we have this megalomaniac who just decides to create a reality and we all have to go along with it. And that it's so dangerous for so many reasons. This fact that he could just say, this is how things are. And his media just follows him right off a cliff. And his people follow him right off a cliff. And the rest of us are supposed to just shut up and put up with it. And this is why so many people in this country are so frustrated with Donald J. Trump, his whole ridiculous MAGA movement, and everything about it, is that I don't want to live in a reality that a crazy person just decides one day. I don't want to live in that. I would rather live in actual reality. I mean, I know that no politician is 100% honest all the time. I don't expect that of any politician, any political party. I hardly worship anyone. But I am sick of the madness of one twisted, diseased ego. I don't know what's wrong with him, but he's not right. I'm sick of him deciding we're all going to do this today. We're all going to believe this today. I'm going to smear my opponent by making something up out of thin air. And half the country, or a third of the country, whatever, just believes him. This is why he is such a frustrating political person. Because as I wrote a couple weeks ago in the lead to one of my podcasts about I really was thinking of The Twilight Zone, but The Twilight Zone is sort of an old reference that not everybody might get, which was an old TV show back in the day. And there is an actual episode where a child somehow becomes God and has the powers of a supernatural being. And this child, who's not yet fully formed, who's still a little kid, sort of decides the fate of everyone. And you can imagine how poorly that goes. That's kind of what we're dealing with. Because Donald J. Trump, if he just doesn't like somebody, he just makes something up about them. And if he wants somebody to go away, he just makes them go away. And then suddenly somebody who was his best friend, oh, I love this person. They're great. They're amazing. They're tremendous. The next day is, oh, that person was terrible. Totally the wrong person. A bad hire. Completely incompetent. Okay, what? He's terrifying. I mean, it's like one thing for you to like live in your stupid golden tower in Manhattan or in Mar-a-Lago or wherever else he has property. If he wants to order his staff around or his workers around like that, fine. But he's talking to other world leaders in an alternate reality. Does he think he can get away with that with them? I think he does think that, because I don't think he's right in the head. Oh my goodness. Now moving on to the next clip, we have this example. It was a very rare moment on Decoding Fox News, because I don't like to do this because it confuses me. I don't want to confuse my audience. The first part of this clip is actually from Monday, October 7th. But I felt like I needed to put this with the other clips because it sort of shows what happens when you perpetuate a lie. And this lie is based on, Sean Hannity was really the one pushing it. This idea that FEMA was only going to pay out $750, that's it. To any survivor of this hurricane, you get $750 and that's it. Here you go.
So much more that could be done, and giving us $750 if you can even apply for it is ridiculous. And I've only heard of a handful of people getting approved. $750 isn't going to do anything even if you do get approved. Not with the damage we're seeing, not with the hurting that people are going through right now.
The little money that they have given out is described as a one-time grant that gives storm victims a lousy $750?
She comes out and offers $750. $750.
We didn't find out until yesterday that they're offering a one-time payment of $750. Americans are offered a one-time $750 payment. But if you're in your, so far, a one-time $750 payment.
So there's been so many bad rumors and disinformation around FEMA that the agency came out with a website dedicated to debunking this. And this is from that website. This is directly from the FEMA website. It starts with rumor. FEMA will only provide $750 to disaster survivors to support recovery. False. This is a type of assistance that you may be approved for soon after you apply, called Serious Needs Assistance. It is an upfront, flexible payment to help cover essential items like food, water, baby formula, breastfeeding supplies, medication, and other emergency supplies. There are other forms of assistance that you may qualify for to receive and serious needs. Assistance is an initial payment you may receive, while FEMA assesses your eligibility for additional funds. As your application continues to be reviewed, you may still receive additional forms of assistance for other needs, such as support for temporary housing, personal property, and home repair costs. And I will add, FEMA was really big on this. They didn't have it at this website, but they had it at other websites, that any grant that a person receives is not considered taxable income, and that it will not affect anyone on disability or any other form of government program as income. So if somebody's already receiving SNAP or already receiving welfare, they can get FEMA. It will not affect their FEMA benefits or Social Security, anything. What's really disheartening about that is in that first section that we heard, that first woman, which again was from Monday, and that was from Fox and Friends, and this woman is saying, well, what's the point? It's only $750 and I don't know anybody who's gotten it anyway. Yeah, because people probably think they can't get it because they're watching Fox. And it's interesting, too, that these rumors are spreading even as people have no power and seemingly no television. But somehow they're finding this out anyway. That's how gross this is. That's how destructive this is. It's horrible. So anyway, this next clip is not really about FEMA, but it's about climate change. And I have so many of Greg Gutfeld, a man who identifies as a comedian. I don't like to call him a comedian because he's incredibly not funny. But this is him thinking he's some sort of expert on climate change. And this includes, I kind of sandwiched it in, a clip from an actual meteorologist from PBS. Here we go.
It used to be instantaneously. A horrible thing would happen, and everybody would blame it on man-made climate change.
While plenty of storms have hit the Big Bend throughout history, experts say the recent ones have been the most intense.
There is some element of just very, very bad luck in this part of the country. But on the other hand, I do think that there's a climate change fingerprint to this.
Ryan Truschelit, a meteorologist based in Tallahassee, says warmer and rising waters in the Gulf of Mexico, driven by climate change, are providing extra fuel for these storms.
I don't believe that we're going to be cooling off the sea surface temperatures anytime soon. So whenever the Big Bend faces a hurricane risk in the future, I do think we've shifted the risk profile, towards a greater proportion of storms approaching being able to sustain major hurricane intensity.
And I think it goes down to people like Bjorn Lomborg. These are people that have tirelessly pointed out the facts. This is an interesting fact. The U.S. population has risen fourfold since 1940, but it has risen 50-fold in coastal areas. So a hurricane that might have hit in 1940 would hit 800,000 homes, now hits 11 million. So when you adjust for wealth and population, the hurricane damage has not increased over the past 100 years, and the total hurricane energy has actually decreased since 1980. So it's at least there's some progress in the way we report these things. But politically, we will never change.
And she didn't mention it either.
No, she didn't. And I think we have turned a corner in the climate change narrative, because so many people have wised up on the climate models being inaccurate, and reading and understanding the research, and also looking now towards how we demonize our mainstream energy sources, and now with nuclear coming along.
So I just want to address Bjorn Lomborg, since he named dropped that person. He's been on Fox before. He's featured all throughout right-wing media. There's a lot of fake experts in climate change who do not have degrees in the field. There's quite a few of them, actually. But if you have enough chutzpah to get out there and say, hey, I'm a climate change expert, I've looked at the models, I've studied the data, and you write ridiculous books about this, you will be a darling of the far right. They'll put you on everything. All the right-wing media will show you over and over again. And they'll even say, oh, your book's amazing. Now, scientists will be screaming at you and saying that you're complete nonsense, that what you published is complete nonsense, but they can get away with it. They can make a lot of money. Michael Schellenberger does this. He tries to pretend he has climate science knowledge. He's written books on climate science. He does not. There's another man named Mark Moran who does the same thing, who does not have a background in climate science whatsoever. And Bjorn Lomborg, who some places call him a scientist, which is hilarious because he has an MA and PhD in political science, which is not a traditional life science. So that is not a related field of study. That's the study of politics. So shut up. You've got to be kidding me. So according to sourcewatch.org, Lomborg is not a climate scientist or an economist and has published little to no peer-reviewed research on environmental or climate policy. His extensive and extensively documented errors and misrepresentations, which are aimed at a lay audience, follow a general pattern of minimizing the need to cut carbon emissions. A scientist-run initiative to link top climate scientists with the media, called the Climate Science Rapid Response Team, debunked an op-ed Lomborg wrote in the Washington Post in 2020, and you can read that. It was very involved. I didn't have the space to include it all. I am going to include very, very quickly one bonus audio clip that I couldn't fit in the newsletter, but for the podcast, I think you'll enjoy it. Here you go.
I'll start with you because you're a Kamala Harris supporter. Yeah. Why are you supporting Kamala Harris?
Because I like the idea that we get to vote every 4 years instead of, oh, if you vote me in, you won't ever have to vote again. Mm-hmm. Okay, does that make sense to you?
It makes sense to me.
All right.
All right, let's go to you, ma'am.
That was a quick Breakfast in Friends segment. That woman was a Harris supporter, and she had a little tiny cheering section in the corner of the diner. Now I'm going to play the reference that she just made to Donald J. Trump saying, you'll never have to vote again. And this is from a few months ago. Here you go.
To save America, get your friends, get your family, get everyone you know, and vote. Vote early. Vote absentee, vote on election day. I don't care how, but you have to get out and vote. And again, Christians, get out and vote just this time. You won't have to do it anymore. 4 more years, you know what? It'll be fixed. It'll be fine. You won't have to vote anymore, my beautiful Christians. I love you, Christians. I'm a Christian. I love you. Get out. You got to get out and vote. In 4 years, you don't have to vote again. We'll have it fixed so good you're not going to have to vote.
Yeah, he's not a dictator. He just sounds like one all the time. That was from July 26th at Turning Point USA. He was making some sort of speech to Christians. Absolutely disturbing. I forgot to do an impression this podcast, so very quickly, before I get to the next segment, because I just saw a clip of her going, "What is this ground beef? I'm Carrie Lake and you're fake news and you're a liar. And I might be doing miserably in the polls in Arizona because they're all liars. I know every time somebody calls up anyone in Arizona, they're saying, do you love Carrie Lake? And they're saying, yes, I do. I love her and I'm going to vote for her. And that pollster hangs up the phone because they're liars. And I not only will be the next senator of Arizona, I will be the ruler of the universe. Melania, watch your back. Okay, that's it. That's my very brief Carrie Lake impression. Next up, we have stories Fox News ignored. Every week, I compare the hours I've watched on Fox to 5 hours of the PBS NewsHour. The following list is a list of stories that PBS covered that Fox News did not. We're going to start with climate disasters. In Nepal, at least 193 people have died due to flooding and mudslides after excessive rainfall hit the area. Police and soldiers have been helping with rescue efforts. The government has shut down schools and colleges across the country for the next 3 days. In Bosnia-Herzegovina, at least 21 people were killed after severe rainstorms caused flooding and landslides. Several roads and homes were also destroyed. Updates in the war in Ukraine. Russia captured the eastern city of Volodya after months of resistance by Ukrainian forces. The population of the town has dropped from 14,000 to just over 100 people. People have evacuated the area. During his maiden trip as NATO Secretary General, Mark Rutte visited Kyiv. The Secretary General met with the President of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, and pledged continued support for Ukraine in its war with Russia. A Russian airstrike on a residential building injured at least 12 in Kharkiv, Ukraine's second largest city. A 3-year-old girl was one of the injured. On to the next of the news. The FBI has agreed to pay more than $22 million to settle a class action lawsuit alleging female recruits were singled out for dismissal in training and routinely harassed by instructors with sexually charged comments about their breast size, false allegations of infidelity, and the need to take contraception to control their moods. On September 30th, the UK became the first G7 country to stop using coal for electricity. Coal has been used to power the country for over 140 years. A Georgia judge has struck down the state's abortion law that banned the procedure after 6 weeks of pregnancy. Fulton County Superior Court Judge Robert McBurney wrote in his order that the law violates Georgia's constitution. Burney's ruling would allow abortions through at least 20 weeks of pregnancy. The Georgia Attorney General said he would appeal to the state Supreme Court. And there actually has been an update on that, but we're going to get to that next week. Claudia Sheinbaum, an environmental scientist and former mayor of Mexico City, was sworn in as the first female president of Mexico last Tuesday. She won the election by a landslide in June as the political protege of the popular outgoing president Andrés Manuel López Obrador. Sheinbaum is also the first Mexican president with Jewish heritage. Japan's ruling governing party selected former defense minister Shigeru Ishiba as its new prime minister. Ishiba vowed to strengthen Japan's military alliance with the United States. France's new prime minister, Michel Barnier, was heckled by members of parliament as he laid out his proposed policies in an inaugural speech. He made promises of austerity measures to tamp down on debt, along with raising taxes. A new report from the ACS, American Cancer Society, found that breast cancer rates have risen 1.4% among younger women under 50, but fatalities are down 10% in the past decade for all ages. 2 Swedish teenage nationals were held in pretrial detention in connection with 2 pre-dawn explosions in the vicinity of the Israeli embassy in Copenhagen, Denmark. Prosecutors said investigators were establishing if the attack was motivated by terrorism. 3 former Memphis police officers were convicted of witness tampering related to the cover-up in the beating of death of Tyree Nichols, an unarmed black man who was pulled over for a driving violation. One officer, Demetrius Haley, was convicted of violating Nichols' civil rights, causing bodily injury. He was also convicted of a conspiracy to witness tamper, charge that the others were acquitted of. U.S. postal workers held rallies across the country, warning of what they call substandard performance by the U.S. Postal Service. The rallies were organized by the American Postal Workers Union, which is calling for the public's help in demanding improved staffing for postal workers, better customer service, and more opportunity for public input. All of this comes before millions of Americans are expected to vote by mail in the next presidential election. The Supreme Court agreed to leave in place 2 EPA rules aimed at reducing the oil and gas industry's emissions of methane gas and mercury. The Supreme Court will also consider a challenge to Mexico's lawsuit accusing the gun maker Smith & Wesson and wholesaler Interstate Arms of aiding the illegal trafficking of firearms to Mexican drug cartels. At least 78 people died after a boat capsized in Lake Kivu in eastern Congo. A search and rescue operation was underway hours later, as many remained unaccounted for from the overcrowded vessel, believed to have had 278 people on board. Indiana Fever Guard Caitlin Clark has been named the 2024 Kia WNBA Rookie of the Year. Clark received 66 votes from a national panel of 67 sports writers and broadcasters. Chicago Sky forward Angel Reese received 1 vote. The UN Human Rights Office reported on a gang attack in the town of Ponte-Sonde in Haiti's Attirbonite department. Members of the Grand Grief gang used automatic rifles to shoot at the population, killing at least 70 people, among them about 10 women and 3 infants. Police clashed with Imran Khan's supporters who held an anti-government rally in support of the jailed former prime minister. The demonstrators gathered in defiance of a ban on protest in Islamabad. Authorities had sealed off the city and blocked cell phone services to prevent the gathering. The Labor Department issued one of the last job reports before the presidential election, and the numbers are strong. It shows 254,000 jobs were added in September, beating expectations. Overall, the report paints a picture of a robust American economy, which remains a top issue this election year. Dike Mutombo, an NBA Hall of Fame player and advocate, died at 58 from brain cancer. Mutombo played in the NBA for 18 seasons, playing for Denver, Atlanta, Houston, Philadelphia, New York, and then the New Jersey Nets. He was also a scholar who learned to speak 9 languages. He funded the Dike Mutombo Foundation in 1997, concentrating on improving health, education, and quality of life for the people in the Congo. John Amos, the actor best known for his roles in the iconic 1970s sitcom Good Times and the groundbreaking miniseries Roots, has died at the age of 84. Amos received an Emmy nomination for his role as the adult Kunakunte in Roots, a miniseries about the horrors of slavery in the United States, which went on to win 9 Emmys, a Golden Globe, and a Peabody Award, and received a massive viewership in the country. When Roots aired on television, it had an audience of 130 million people, which was approximately half the U.S. population in 1977. And I think I grew up in the 70s. John Amos was absolutely amazing on Good Times. That was the only show I watched him on. Loved the show, loved him. It's a shame to see him go. And of course, Fox didn't mention him. So that's all the stories that PBS included that Fox did not. Now we're moving on to the top 5 topics where I compare Fox to PBS. And we're going to start with Fox. Number 1, VP debate, 36%. Hurricane Helene aftermath, 13%. 10% Israel-Hamas war, 9% bashing Kamala Harris, and 9% dock worker strike. PBS NewsHour, we start with 19% Israel-Hamas war, 14% Hurricane Helene aftermath, 9%, I think this is a much bigger story, they did mention it on Fox, Trump's legal problems, the Jack Smith court documents that were released, 8% VP debate, and 7% was just the presidential race. And then we go words on Fox News for the week ending October 6, 2024. Trump, 773. Kamala, 493. Israel, 393. Tim Walz, 384. Hurricane, 137. Economy, 116. Migrant, 107. Fact check, 100. FEMA, 96. Inflation, 88. China, 77. Disaster, 66. Polls, 45. Crime, 27. Hillary, as in Hillary Clinton, 11. October surprise, 8. And AOC, believe it or not, 0. every time she doesn't get on the list. And that's it. But Hillary got on the list. It's always one of the women Democrats. They gotta pick on the women Democrats. And that's the podcast for the week. I'm exhausted. I don't know about you. I haven't watched anything today. I just worked in the newsletter, so I have no idea what's going on. I have no idea. If you'd like to check out more of my work, you can find me on Twitter, also known as X, Threads, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, TikTok. I hate TikTok though. I might delete it. I hate it. They keep censoring me. And you can also become a paid subscriber to Decoding Fox News or a paid supporter of Decoding Fox News at Substack for Decoding Fox News or my Patreon for Decoding Fox News. You can also find a version of this podcast on the YouTube channel for Resolute Square. They do great graphics for me. It's fun. I don't have time to do graphics. It's cool to watch them do graphics. And my mascots, Odin and Thor, the cats also send their love. I'm going to be going to a conference tomorrow, so I won't be online. I know, a podcasting thing. What? It's called a tax write-off, and networking. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm not good at these things. I'm too aggressive as a networker. I just go up to people and go, "Hi, I'm Juliet Jeske of Decoding Fox News. You probably follow me on Twitter." I'm half kidding. I'm very aggressive. I'm very New York. When I do anything networking, I just shove my hand right into their face and go, "Hello, hi, I live in New York. We're like this." Anyway, it's true. If you live here, you know what I'm talking about. That's about it. I will see you at the next podcast. Thank you so much for listening.
Resolute Square.